With that, we're going to go to our second regular talk given by Alexander Sax on mid-level visual representation, improved generalization, and sample efficiency for learning visual motor policies.
So hi, everybody. Good morning. I'm Sasha. Thanks for the introduction. The conclusion is in the title. So I could probably leave now, but I'm here to give a talk. So I'm a second-year PhD student at UC Berkeley, and I'll be presenting our work. I won't read the title again. The central question we try to address is how can we train good visuomotor policies, or functions which map images to actions that accomplish some downstream goal. This is an exciting time to work on the problem, because thanks to end-to-end deep RL, it's become possible to train agents to do this for a large variety of tasks. It's an elegant approach and very general, but it suffers a couple drawbacks. First, it's extremely sample inefficient, sometimes requiring billions of frames to learn reasonable behaviors in a simple video game environment. And second, the resulting policies are brittle and can fail in catastrophic and unexpected ways when the color changes or the lighting shifts or the agent is moved to a new building different from where it was trained. We seek to address this problem of learning that is too general in some sense by imposing some sort of visual priors that bias learner agents towards using useful visual abstractions. For example, that the world is 3D, or that there are objects and images and all the pixels in that object will move in some constrained manner. We found that doing so has several benefits. It improves performance, generalization, and sample efficiency. Now let's focus on where these priors come from. We have a prior work from CVPR last year, taskonomy. For those of you unfamiliar, briefly, it's a fully computational method for extracting transfer relationships across a dictionary of tasks. And we borrow our visual priors from this paper. Here are the results from the models trained on some of those different tasks, applied to a YouTube video. You can see there's a large and diverse set of visual tasks being solved here, and we use this dictionary of vision tasks and plug it into the loop for training RL agents. Before we get into the details of how we do that, let's focus on why mid-level vision could be useful for improving generalization and sample efficiency. When you're in raw input space, the train and test samples might not overlap if they look different, while what a feature does is basically warp that input so that the regions in the train and test distributions have more overlap. So when your agent sees the world through this warping lens, or abstraction, as we called it, then it could have a better chance of generalizing thanks to these useful invariances. We then plug these features into RL in the simplest way possible. Instead of providing the image to the policy, we first extract a statistic of the image using this feature encoder, and then we provide that statistic to the policy instead of the image itself. It's basically the dumbest thing you can do. You could always improve this, but this is a lower bound. And during training, only the policy is updated. The feature encoder remains fixed. Now that we've covered what mid-level abstractions are and how they can be integrated into the RL loop, we need to evaluate whether they're useful. And so we implemented a suite of 3 different visuomotor tasks: navigation, exploration, and local planning. Visual navigation is where the agent needs to navigate to some target object, in this case, a wooden crate. During training, it needs to learn to recognize what object it should go to, as well as how to navigate to it. Second is visual exploration, where the agent is dropped into some unseen environment and needs to unlock as much of the environment as possible in a limited amount of time. It has a little myopic laser scanner and uses that to unlock occupancy cells. Third is local planning, sometimes called point navigation or waypoint finding, where the agent needs to go to some target coordinate that's specified non-visually. For all these tasks, at every time step, the agent gets frames from an onboard RGB camera and maybe some little bit of side information necessary just to make the task well posed. We implemented this in a bunch of environments, including one called Gibson, which virtualizes real buildings. It has scans of 572 real buildings reconstructed with the images attached. So the agents learn from data that's grounded in the real world, and this is in contrast to using like a synthetic simulator, which just visually looks quite different. We use this data set and others in multiple environments, always maintaining a train-test split. For Gibson, for example, we use up to 74 training buildings, depending on the experiment, and we always use 14 test buildings. We compared different control groups, like training from scratch, blind, or non-learning methods like SLAM, and we compared to different current representation learning approaches. So during the talk, I'm going to try to convince you of 2 things. First, that mid-level features can improve your performance, generalization, and sample complexity. And second, that which feature you should use depends on the task you're trying to solve. So let's dive right in. What we want are agents which navigate gracefully, avoiding walls and taking efficient paths to their goal. For all the tasks, we found that agents using mid-level vision consistently outperformed learning from scratch, and also the other comparisons. This was true across tasks and across the different environments. They didn't perform just better according to test set reward. They also performed better along other metrics developed for different tasks. I'm not going to go into the details, but for both of these metrics, higher is better, and I tried to indicate that with the little arrows on the left-hand side. Agents using mid-level vision are shown in the red box, and they perform significantly better along both of these metrics. They also perform better along sort of behavior that we would like to emerge that wasn't explicitly encoded for in the reward. So agents using these mid-level priors had significantly fewer collisions along the way and produced less jerky trajectories. Here's an example of what I mean by a jerky trajectory. This agent was trained from scratch, and this is fairly typical. You get this left-right shaking that's really unpleasant and inefficient. We're not the first to find that agents trained from scratch do this. Other works, such as Bonsall et al. At Coral this year, specifically sought to address the problem by integrating optimal control. We found that simply adding better vision goes a long way towards solving the issue. And of course, you could combine the two approaches. This is an example of an agent trained using 3D key points. So in addition to that, we found that agents exhibited other desirable behavior. They handled sparse rewards basically as well as dense rewards. For this metric, higher is better. And it compared favorably against existing approaches which were explicitly designed to handle sparse rewards. We also took away ground truth localization, and agents using mid-level vision suffered minor, almost no drop. And if you had to choose between using ground truth localization or using better vision in this RL setup, the gains from using mid-level vision were about 4.5 times as large. So good test set performance comes from two sources. How much did you learn? And then how well did you apply that to the test set? We focused on the generalization. We looked at trained test performance. And the agents using mid-level vision generalized much better. But interestingly, they also generalized to longer episodes than anything seen during training. So we trained on short episodes of 5 meters or less, looked at episodes that were longer, and the mid-level vision-based agents are shown in red here. They outperformed the second and third best approaches, which explicitly encoded the environment dynamics. So those types of encodings, environment dynamics, should help with the type of generalization that we're looking at. But vision seemed to be the greater problem in this specific setup. So that's great. You get good performance, but do you have to train for longer? Actually, no. Agents using mid-level vision needed about an order of magnitude less data. We measured this in a couple different ways across environments and tasks, and the results were pretty consistent. They reached the same final performance as agents trained from scratch, using only 1/10 of the data. So hopefully I've convinced you that using mid-level vision can possibly improve performance. The question then becomes, which feature should you choose? And we found that choice depends on the task. Here are the top 3 features for each of the different tasks we tried. They're ranked, and the reward is shown in parentheses. For navigation, the agent needs to navigate to some target cube, and object classification features work the best here, probably because if you can't recognize the object, you can't find it. For exploration, the agent needed to find wide open spaces to explore. Depth estimation worked the best there. And notably, no feature was the best on all tasks, and no feature even broke the top 3. But it's not that the feature ranks were just noise, because within task and between environments, the feature ranking was stable, with a Spearman's row of 0.9 or 0.8, depending on whether we're transferring to other simulators or the real world. So from this, we concluded that which feature performs well depends heavily on the task and not so much on the environment. So that's great. If you know your task, you just pick a feature, and pretty reliably it will work for you. But what do you do if the task is unknown or changing? We propose that a set of features could provide more general perception, and we propose a specific example of this set, computationally deriving it to improve worst-case performance. The full formulation is in the paper. I'm not going to go into it, but we tried it out. This set is completely agnostic to the task, and it outperformed the state-of-the-art, outperforming training from scratch, and basically was comparable to choosing the best feature for your task if you had known what the task was and which feature would have worked. For all these results, we found that using proper mid-level vision actually makes training RL policies more convenient and stable, All the results didn't use any hyperparameter tuning. We tuned for scratch and then just applied the hyperparameters to these new policies. No architecture search, no random restarts, no ensembling, no initialization from behavior cloning, no reward shaping, and no domain adaptation. So we didn't do anything to the feature encoders. We just took them from a different data set, plopped them in there, and then trained our agents. We made an entry into the CVPR habitat challenge using this simple method without any of the tricks, and it won the competitions track that we entered. We have demos online that allow you to visualize agents trained for any of the tasks using any feature, and you can do so quantitatively too, looking at both the training and the test curves. Another work that we'll link to on the project website shows examples of sim-to-real transfer without any fine-tuning. The agent is trained to navigate to an orange cube, and then we apply it on a real robot, and it does so successfully, even in the presence of white distractor cubes, shown on the right-hand side. We do this for other tasks in cluttered environments, and the agent again navigates gracefully, avoiding the chairs and things in the Stanford Computer Science building. So in summary, mid-level visual representations provide critical advantages over learning tabula rasa. They can be plugged into existing RL frameworks and can improve performance, generalization, sample complexity, all the stuff I talked about. But the choice of representation depends on the task, and when the task is uninterchanging, a set of features can improve performance. We provided a specific example, and there's a lot more on our website. Thanks.
Thanks, Sasha. We have time for questions. I know you want your break, but we still have time for questions.
So when you said you take the encoders and you just kind of plug and play them in there, how did you pick which ones to plug and play?
So we tried all of them, and then looked at how well the different features performed. And that was what we showed. Like, some of them perform much better in different tasks than others, but we just tried all of them.
Okay. And you didn't, oh, sorry. You didn't think of trying to train one yourself, hand design for this one?
We didn't hand design any of the features. There were some self-supervised methods that we tried. We trained those self-supervised methods in Taskonomy and then applied them here. Those results are in the paper in the appendix. Yeah, definitely encourage you to check it out.
Thanks.
There's one question in the back.
How do you foresee this will work in the presence of many dynamic agents? Because here it might call for more flexibility than a single feature that's really targeted for the task of navigation.
I totally agree. And even within, with one agent and over many time steps, you might want to choose different features depending on the context that you're in. So I think there's a lot more that could be done. It's a really interesting direction to try to use different features for different parts of the image or during different time steps.
One last question, yes?
Quick question, great talk. Instead of rely on these mid-level vision feature, what do you think about relying more on disentangled representation, where you disentangle the representation into different factors, where your different tasks can just pick the different factors, just leveraging the compositional nature? Would this be better?
I think this is a way of doing the disentangling. It breaks the input image into different things like the 3D surface normal representation or the color or something. And so in some way, this is disentangling the image into different latent spaces. I think that's partially why it's helpful, because it isolates the invariances you might want for this particular task.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Okay, with that, let's thank Sasha again.